Welcome to Wisdom House Retreat and Conference Center, and welcome to the new exhibit that we're having at the center that is a part of our ongoing dedication to spirituality, education, and the arts. The present exhibit that we have at Wisdom House is located in our chapel right here at the center. And in this chapel we have an installation piece entitled The Transfourming Sorrow. It is an installation work that is the work of a Lebanese artist of Armenian descent, and his name is Kardash Onnig. This is a unique exhibit in that it invites people into the act of transformation. It invites people to go beyond the differences of individuals, beyond the differences of all kinds of borders, beyond the differences of boundaries that we set up for each other. Beyond these differences so that we can experience the act of transformation, which is always a stretch for us. This particular exhibit is a multisensory exhibit, and so it will involve sights, it will involve sounds, it will involve aromas that will invite you into this experience, and in going through it, to come out into new life and to a new acceptance of self and to a new acceptance of others as well as our world. At this exhibit, we have the opportunity to experience different forms of sculptures that will engage us, different sounds that will engage us. The exhibit opens on May 20 and will close on July 29. We ask that those coming to the exhibit, because of the uniqueness of it, if they would call ahead of time to let us know when they would like to come to see this particular show. The gallery hours are Monday to Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Our telephone number is 860-567-3163. And this is at Wisdom House Retreat and Conference Center in Litchfield. We welcome you to come. We hope that it will be for you an experience of transformation.
My name is Kardash Onnig. I am of Armenian descent. My parents, both of my parents, were in exile from Turkey in 1915-1920 period, when there was a genocide of the Armenians, and they landed in Lebanon. In 1958, I came to the United States, and I've been living here. And I've dealt with this issue since it's very close to the Armenian psyche. I've dealt with genocide issue and what is grief, basically. Age 11, 12, for the first time I was exposed to a Calder book, art book. And the consciousness of universal language was very attractive to me, and I always dealt with it. And as someone who would invent one day, as it happened, an idea of creating new tools, new alphabet that is universal. And it's been the goal in my life for many years. In the 60s, I was involved in multimedia. That has become a big thing. And there was a realization at the time that coming from McLuhan and the linearity of medium is the message, I realized that using two-dimensional media, be it projection system and sound and so forth, adding them does not add up to three-dimensional. So in the 60s, late 60s, I left that world, I left corporate world, and started studying what would be three-dimensional alphabet for communication. And since then, I have been living upstate New York in a Thoreau-esque kind of environment, with an Emersonian kind of psyche of attempting universality. I have worked on trying to invent three-dimensional tools for transferences between people. 2015 was the 100th anniversary of the Armenian genocide, which was being celebrated all over the world. And I considered to do a project for it. And it happened that particular year, a childhood friend of mine, whose father was my poetry teacher, had written a book of poems. He was a survivor of the genocide, and he had gone through the Second World War, and he had seen Lebanese war and the Armenians killing each other war in Lebanon. And ultimately his 30-year-old son had died in a car accident. So in that disaster of grief, he had written this book of poems. And to come out of that grief of his whole life's pain, he ultimately said he ended up adopting all victims as his own child. He had become a universal poet. And then I took the poem and I gave the poetry to musicians to put music background, basically to create this environment of grief. This is behind me, is the project. But for me, the part of the transcending this grief to become universal was, how was it for me? I had to understand, accept that that which was my culture, the Armenian language I grew up with, I had to give that up. I had to sacrifice my own mother tongue, if you like, with all the 4 languages that I speak, and I had to give them all up to transcend the two-dimensionality of alphabets. And I came out to invent 3-dimensional tools for communication. The recitation is in Armenian. This is the poem of Vahivahyan. After I did I designed 4 speakers, each speaker specifically for the sound of that particular person. And the middle one, the 4 speakers, is for the best way to hear the wealth and the richness of the Armenian language. Then I gave the language to Zulal, the a cappella trio, Armenians, and they put the sound into it. Then on the drum is the heartbeat while it's being, the recitation was being made. And the whole thing then I gave to Phil Mofa, who is a composer, electronic. He put it together and composed this particular speaker. So I designed the speaker, the system, to create an atmosphere of agony, of pain. But this was my past. This is where I come from. And to come out of this pain is the pieces on the outside. It's me transcending this pain, becoming a universal person, and transcending this language, this pain, this agony, and creating a future for myself. Through the years, since the 60s, I would say, Marshall McLuhan, and the linearity of alphabets, I have made attempts at seeing the linearity of history that I grew up with. In fact, linearity of history all cultures grew up with. This kind of every culture having their own alphabet, their own border national, and every one of them has written their own alphabet the way they've seen it. And it's two-dimensional in a sense, is that it's their history. It doesn't include what this particular culture has done to others. It only includes what others have done. It's sort of a victim story. I gave up that victim history in 1969 when April 24th, when the world celebrates that period, the Armenian genocide. I marched with a poster say, "Unhate a Turk this day, April 24th. I gave up hate. With hate, giving up this idea of hating the other, I gave up victimhood. That, giving up the victimhood, forced me to look at my own history and see the evil that my culture has done to others. By seeing that, I transcended the grief that was a monotheistic in a sense that only told my history the way I would like to see it. But I had to accept the other's history too, the grief of others. Very similar to Vahivahyan. I had to accept that my culture had caused so much grief unto others. And by accepting that, I could not anymore stay with this linearity of a history that was given. Very similarly to all cultures, being in America and listening to American history and its linearity, denying others, very similar to Jewish people, denying others' history, only being a victim, only telling the victim history. All it does, it propagates more victimhood, more hate, more revenge, more nationalism, more childhood. But basically, the essence of the problem is this linearity of alphabets and nationalism, which is causing disaster in the world today. I was given a piece of property in Stanfordville because this person, Sam Shaw, my lawyer in New York City, whose son had committed suicide, and he, to transcend his grief, offered me part of his land where I went and moved in and built a house, raised my family, so he could come and visit. And I sort of became like symbolically the transforming of his grief. And this piece is a symbolic of it. When that moment happened, when this transference happened to me of his grief, when he dragged me to the top of this mountaintop and he pointed out to the 4 directions of the property and where I was given the gift. So this symbolically, this particular piece represents that transference. My step-grandfather had been married. His wife had died at childbirth, and they had a son who died at 9 months old. And later on, when he had married my grandmother and I was born, they decided to adopt me. But my mother could not do it, so they sent me back home. But they named me after his son. So I became, this is a piece, the birth, my birth, and transference of how I became to transcend his grief by him adopting me, and they named me after the son. So all through my childhood, I was always picked up and said, he looks just like Onnig. I used to think my name looks like Onnig. So it was another symbol of grief being transformed. This is a quilt that my mother has sewn. My father was a tailor, something 1937. And on it, there are 130 quaternaries, and because my work is about the quaternary, in essence, creation. What these are, I made, this is clay from my property. I dug it up, cured it, and then I created these forms. Each one of these is a transference of a concept between myself and others, and each one is made with the 4 characters that I've invented by pushing into the center of it. And then I pit fired it. So basically it's a local clay from my property, fired with the wood from my property. And there are 130 of them. And in essence, I've been told actually by the same poet, Vaivalian, that the Armenian culture itself has 130 essence ideas. Sort of like what the Muslims believe in the 99 attributes of Allah. This is 130 essences that the culture is made of. Come to the realization that to transcend the grief that humanity has caused unto each other is to accept a concept that's beyond our national, tribal alphabets, to accept some kind of a universal consciousness that can bring us together. Today more than ever, we have to give up. We have to give up that grief that we carry, which turns into hate, which turns into revenge, which makes us into a victim. We have to transcend it, and that transcending liberates us from the slavery. And in accepting, for me, the quaternary of the 4 disciplines of science, art, philosophy, and spirituality together in harmony is in essence the cure for our pain. We have to bring harmony between these 4. Otherwise, individually, every one of them has guided us in the wrong path. Be that science, that where militarily we do, without the scientist taking responsibility of the other thing. Similarly, the artist, traveling on the art path and not taking responsibility of our spiritual growth, our responsibility of science, to take responsibility that what we have caused, the disaster in the world, it's our responsibility, individually and as a group. And to transcend that, philosophically, politically, we have to accept that transcending the grief that we have is accepting universality, something Thoreau spoke of, something Tolstoy spoke of, something Emerson spoke of. So did Martin Luther King. We have to follow in their path of universality.